COIN, C-suite offering investors and network. It takes you literally 5 minutes to check through a project and find out if it's legit. If it gets one red cross, then don't do it. But if it's got 4 green ticks, then go for it.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews.
Hello there and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. This is the show that gets you in front of your best audience and keeps you there. Now today I have the wonderful Jeremy Britton on the line with me. How are you, Jeremy?
I'm doing exceptionally well, mate. Loved the long weekend.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. They always go by a bit too quickly. But on today's show, you and I, we're going to be talking about your work as a best-selling author. You're obviously an entrepreneur and a cryptocurrency specialist, and we're going to be talking about how you accidentally created the world's first diversified crypto mutual fund with your business, Boston Trading. But before we do any of that, Jeremy, I'd love to learn a little bit about you. Now, we started off our conversation talking about the potential for dogs to interrupt us throughout the calls. And, given the fact that Boston Trading uses a dog for their logo, let's start there. Do you have any pets?
I do have 2 little Boston Terriers, mate.
There you go. I'm not surprised about that. I've actually, I've actually seen some images of them. They must bring you a great deal of joy.
Yes, a great deal of joy, particularly during quarantine when there was, no excuse for leaving the house unless you had a puppy. So you had to, walk the dog around the block once a day. It was like the highlight of quarantine.
Absolutely. Now, tell us where you're calling in from today.
I'm in Brisbane.
Right. Now, I know they're getting pretty well smashed with weather, as is New South Wales. How are you going for weather in your specific location?
Yeah, we're doing all right here at the moment. We've had a lot of rain and the lawn is looking very long. I've got the tomatoes and the passion fruit in the backyard are just going bananas.
I bet.
The worst weather we had was in January.
Yep.
We had flooding in Brisbane in January, and our house was okay because it's on the top of the hill, but down the bottom of the hill, about 100 metres away, is a whole bunch of cafes and restaurants and pubs and this sort of stuff. And down the bottom of the hill was underwater, and all their power for all of those businesses is actually underground. Oh. So the council had to cut off the power to our entire suburb until they could drain down there. So I'm working from home, and for 7 days I had no power.
Nothing.
No electricity, no air conditioning, no internet. It was very difficult to get things done, mate.
So are you on the Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast? Whereabouts are you?
Brisbane. I used to live in the Sunshine Coast. I moved down to Brisbane. I did a stint in Bali for a couple of years, worked from there as well. So
yeah, no, I was going to ask you about that. Tell us about that. I've been to Bali a handful of times. I love it there.
Yeah. I'd visited Bali every year or so. I'd go over to Bali.
It's religious, isn't it?
When my kids were young, I'd save up all year by not spending any money, and then go to Bali once a year, and I could get a leather jacket made for $50. I could get 3 suits made for $100. So it'd be my sort of changing my clothes every year and taking the kids over there. It's just a wonderful place to visit. And I got a few friends who lived over there, and back in 2015, one of my friends said, you got to come over here and stay a lot longer. And I said, it's fine for a holiday, but, the internet speeds aren't as good. And, that sort of stuff. It's different living there to actually visiting, because I could go without internet for a week, but not for a month.
No, I'm with you there.
In 2015, my friend said, look, they've put fibre optics right across the island. Wow. I said, no, Australia's been talking about this NBN network for ages, and we'll have to have all the environmental conversations about digging up the green tree frogs and that sort of stuff. And Bali just didn't care. Bali just said, we need high-speed internet. They bulldozed a couple of neighbourhoods that were in the way, and they had no environmental concerns. They just put in high-speed internet.
Just did it.
So I went over for 30 days as a trial. And I found the internet speeds in Bali were about 3 times faster than what they were in Australia for about 1/10 of the price. Oh. And so then I went, because usually I go over there and I'd stay in resorts and things like that. So I went over there and went, okay, where am I going to rent a place that's close to the beach where I can watch the sunrise over the ocean? Where am I going to get my laundry done? Where am I going to buy a fridge? All this sort of logistical stuff I did for 30 days. And I came back to Australia, sold everything and moved to Bali. And I'm like, okay, This is where I'm going to be working from. So,
yeah, that's excellent. I love these sorts of stories because there's always a story behind the story. And, what else do you like to do with yourself? I know that you've done a handful of startups, but you must be so busy. Do you have any time for yourself, and do you have any hobbies that you enjoy?
Well, that's part of the fun. Like one of my businesses way back in the dark ages.
Yep.
I was working 76 hours a week, and that was
because
I thought I needed to, right? Like I thought I needed to, because the way of an employee mindset is you work more hours, you make more money. Mm-hmm. That's just how it works. And I because I'd been an employee and my parents were employees, and at school you're taught by employees. And that was kind of the mindset that I carried into my business. And working 40 hours a week, I made good income. And when I started working 45 and 50 hours a week, I made more money, because that's kind of logical. And so I just kept working more and more and more hours. And you sort of top out after a while.
Yeah.
But you don't realize it because you're so busy all the time. And, I worked 76 hours a week for a while.
Yep.
My health suffered. I ended up having a stress-related heart attack when I was 33 years old.
Wow.
My kids were still in primary school, and the doctor said to me, if you don't change something in your lifestyle, you're going to have another heart attack. And if you have another heart attack, you'll be dead. And I went, okay, what do I change? And the doctor said, look, I'm not a life coach, I'm a surgeon. It's not my job to tell you what to change, but you need to change something. Otherwise, you'll be back here in 12 months in a body bag rather than on the table.
Oh, geez.
And so I went, okay, got to change something. And I thought, well, I'm not like a health nut or a doctor or anything like that, but I sort of figured when I cook a steak and then you leave the pan, the fat goes solid. And part of the thing is having fat inside of yourself. It's going to block up your arteries and things like that. Yeah. Whereas if you have a salad and you leave the oil, the vegetable oil is liquid at room temperature. So in my genius, I just went, okay, I'm not going to eat meat anymore because it might block up my arteries. I'm just going to switch to vegetarian.
Okay.
And then I said, I'm going to give up coffee, and I'm going to give up alcohol. I'm going to give up cigarettes, because those things are apparently bad for you. So, and they're like, what else can I give up? What else can I give up? Maybe working 70 hours a week is not so good. And I was pulling in six figures back then. And I thought, okay, if I sell my 7-bedroom mansion, if I downsize and buy this beach shack on the Sunshine Coast, I could potentially work, because I've given the fear of God into me. My kids are little, in primary school. And I thought, okay, I'm going to create a business where I can drop my kids off at school at 9 a.m. and then see my first client. And I'll see another client at 11 o'clock. I'll see another client at 1 o'clock. I'll finish up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll pick up my kids and spend the rest of the day at the beach. And I don't want to work Fridays, because no one likes working Fridays. So, working 6 hours a day, 4 days a week was 24 hours versus 76. And so that's why I thought I'll scale back my lifestyle, sell a couple of cars, get rid of the house, buy a little beach shack, and adjust myself so I can live on a third of my income, because the money's not important after you have a heart attack, followed swiftly by a 6-figure divorce, because I was never home for my partner. So I'd lost my money, I'd lost my health, and I was okay, I'm going to focus on this stuff. So I started working 24 hours a week. I started another financial planning business. I called myself the 24-hour wealth coach, and people thought I worked 24 hours a day, but it was only just 24 hours a week. But the interesting thing is, Richard, I got to first 6 months, I'm finding a lot of really good clients that I couldn't find previously. And I was in a new town. I didn't know anybody on the Sunshine Coast. I just sort of turned up there, and then I got a few more clients and a few more clients and a few more clients. And by the end of the year, I sort of looked back at my figures and went, my income's dropped by about 10%. I was expecting a 60% drop in income because I'd cut back my hours by 60%. And one of my clients who was with me in the previous business, when I was in Toowoomba, and he actually travelled 3 hours to come and see me and said, look, the new bloke's not looking after me. I want to be looked after by you. And I said, well, look, this is the hours I work. I don't travel. I don't do anything. I don't do any after-hours appointments. And he said, well, I'm bloody glad to hear that. Because you were always so stressed when I saw you. I said, mate, why didn't you say anything before I had a heart attack? He said, not my place to say, but he said, I used to watch you writing down things on your notepad and you had white knuckles. And that was not a good sign. I'm like, wow, Okay.
So tell me something, Jeremy. How do you feel today? I mean, you've changed your lifestyle, and you've geared yourself in a way that suits you. And now I think this is a very, very important insight that we've already taken away from this call, because there's going to be a lot of startups, entrepreneurs listening to this, thinking they have to burn the candle at both ends, so to speak. And we know that that's clearly not true. You know also that you can't take these so-called things you own with you. We're only ever borrowing things, aren't we? And first, and the last part of all this, I'd just love to know, with all that being said, do you still get up early? What's your daily routine look like? Do you have a fitness thing that you do? What's your thing?
My thing is meditation. I discovered meditation 15 years ago. And it's absolutely amazing, absolutely changed my life. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 5, and by two different doctors. Yep. And my parents, who had four daughters and then one son, just went, "Oh no, he's not ADHD. He's just a boy. He's just different. He just runs around like crazy because he's a boy." Where the girls are sitting in the corner reading a book and playing with their dolls, I was destroying half the house. So I was never treated. I was never re-diagnosed. I was never medicated.
Yep.
But I do have this thing where I love to be busy all the time, and that. Harnessing that was kind of the secret of success, really. I mean, Richard Branson's got ADHD and he's got like 500 different businesses. So harnessing that, but also being able to stop. And that's in my past life before the heart attack, which I used to wake up and have a couple of cups of coffee, drink 6 to 10 coffees a day. And at nighttime, my brain wouldn't stop. So I would just self-medicate. Wow. I'd have half a bottle of something and fall asleep.
Wow.
But learning meditation is really like, basically, it's turning off, rebooting your brain, even if it's just for 10 or 15 minutes, just stopping all the thoughts and winding down, and also learning to breathe. Like the power in all martial arts, doesn't matter whether you do karate or judo or whatever, is also the power of the breath. And there's a specific way of breathing when you punch or when you kick or when you throw someone or even when you're defending. Yep. And by harnessing the power of the breath, you can actually tap into the subconscious mind and the subconscious power. And so I'm not religious about it. It's just one of those things. It's like a thing that you can do. I like to work out, but meditation is absolutely cannot miss it.
Tell me something. So, can you just switch this on and switch this on off when you need it? The meditation.
Of course.
Do you find it different times a day, or?
Sometimes, like I've got a little app called Insight Timer. It's free for the iPhone. I'm not sure about the Android. And there's like 3,000 different meditations on there. They're all free. And you can just say, I've got 7 minutes in between appointments, or I've got 30 minutes, or I need to fall asleep. And how do I do that? So guided meditations are great. I went and did the Vipassana course, which is a 10-day silent retreat. So you hear me talking now. I talk fast. I talk a lot. So going to a retreat where you could not speak for 10 days was just a mind-blowing experience. But your brain slows down. And you learn that rushing around like a bull at a gate all the time is not necessarily the best way to run a business or yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I say, heart attack followed by a 6-figure divorce and then reassess your life. No. I was running around with both arms, like catching butterflies, trying to get a new client, trying to get new business all the time. And then when I sat back, because I took 3 months off post-surgery, and started to think about what would I like my business to be like, what would I like my life to be like. And I thought, if I just focus on myself and mental health and physical health, and just working less, spending more time with my kids, spending more time at the beach, unconsciously I was building a garden. And if instead of chasing the butterflies all day, if you sit back and you spend some time building a beautiful garden, the butterflies just come to you. And that's what I found when I created the additional business and got rid of the old one, is that I would meet new clients and better clients by sitting down at the coffee shop at the beach and just relaxing there and checking my email at the beach in a coffee shop, rather than being in the office and doing cold calls or sending out marketing campaigns. Because invariably there'd be someone sitting across from me at the table in the coffee shop at the beach. And the guy who's sitting across the table at 9 or 10 in the morning is a guy who doesn't need to be in the office. No. So he's usually a business owner. He's usually got a lot more money, or he's a tourist, or he's semi-retired or something like that. So rather than rushing around trying to find these guys, I just sat back and, hey, There they are. I go to the gym at 11 o'clock in the morning, and the only people in the gym at 11 o'clock are either unemployed, who probably can't afford the gym fees, or the guys who own a business that they don't need to be there. The real entrepreneurs who have delegated all the tasks out, and they're at the gym in the middle of the day.
They say you become like those you hang around. That certainly seems to be the fact for you. Now, I'd love to expand on that very point. Now, you've mentioned learning throughout this conversation that we're having today, Jeremy, and I'm loving the call. But tell me a little bit about those people that were in your life early on that helped you form you into the man that you've become today. Were there any prominent people that you can look to?
Well, I'd have to give a shout out to my folks. My folks were both school teachers. So again, nothing wrong with it. They were employees. They didn't run their own business. They didn't set their own hours. Didn't have a lot of money, particularly when mum was, raising the next baby, because, we had one income and 6 kids for most of the time.
Wow.
And I always thought, like, I wanted toys. Like, I'd see someone drive past in a Ferrari and go, oh my God, I want to have a car like that. And, obviously my folks didn't have those sort of toys because they were school teachers, they were employees, they were on like sort of, a standard wage. And when I left home, I started to seek out and find people who had a more exciting life. And I thought, I obviously don't want to be a school teacher like my folks. I want to create my own destiny. But because I've had that ingrained in myself of simplifying complex terminologies and things like that and teaching people things. So when I started my first financial planning business, I was actually taking all the jargon away, taking all the bullshit away, and just teaching people the fundamental stuff in plain English.
Yeah.
So I've got my parents' gift of simplifying the complex, and I do that with stocks and shares, I do that with economics, I do that with cryptocurrency, making things very simple. So I'm essentially basically doing what my folks did. I'm just teaching people who are a lot older because they're like 40 or 50-year-olds rather than 5-year-olds, and also getting paid better for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, I guess, part of the genesis story for Boston Trading. Could you tell us a little bit about how Boston Trading actually came about? Where did the idea for it come from?
Yeah, well, I've always loved stocks and shares. That's been what I grew up on basically, and started most of my startup businesses with that. And in 2012, one of my friends who's also a financial planner said, "Hey, you're smart. You're all over macroeconomics. You should get into this Bitcoin thing. It's fantastic." And I'm like, "What's a Bitcoin?" And he's like, "It's kind of like an electronic money system thing, and it costs about $6."
Yep.
And I'm like, "Why would I pay $6 for something that doesn't exist?" Like, I just didn't get it.
$6. Wow.
And he spent some time trying to convince me. I didn't understand it. I said no. He put all of his money into Bitcoin. He wrote a book about Bitcoin and how fabulous it was. And I just kind of let it go. Didn't really get it. And a few years later, it was like 2014, 2015. And, again, I'm working remotely, and I subcontract got a virtual assistant in the Philippines, and one in Indonesia, and one in Africa, and one in India.
Yep.
And sending money to these people, like a bank transfer, was costing me about $30. And some of these people in emerging economies didn't even have a bank account. So I'd have to send it via Western Union. Like, I put in cash, they'd go and pick up the cash with their ID.
Pretty outdated process.
Yeah, and Western Union was like $70, I think. And I was chatting to this friend of mine saying, like, paying these people is just driving me crackers. And he said, "Oh, I use Bitcoin." I said, "I've heard of that Bitcoin thing." And he said, yeah, it's basically money that you can email, and it costs about 50 cents. I said, "Run that by me again." He's like, "Well,
what?
In the olden days, we used to send a photo home to your mum and she'd open the envelope, but now you can just email photos and you can email documents. This is just money that you can email, and to send someone $1,000 costs about 50 cents. And I went, "Well, that's significantly cheaper than the bank. Why didn't anyone tell me about this beforehand?" So I bought a boatload of Bitcoin and then, paid these guys. They didn't worry about the fluctuations, of course, because they'd cash out the money the same day. And I thought, Bitcoin's great. And then the next month I'd buy a boatload of Bitcoin and I'd send it off to these people. And after 3 or 4 months, I thought, I'm just going to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, because every time I go onto the internet and put in my credit card details to buy Bitcoin, I'm kind of a little bit concerned about security.
Yep.
So I bought a bunch of Bitcoin, and this was 2016, 2017, before everything went nuts. So I bought, like maybe a couple of $1,000 worth of Bitcoin.
Yep.
Paid all the staff. Then the next month paid all the staff. Then the next month paid all the staff. The next month paid all the staff. And went back and checked my balance and went, oh, there's a lot more in there than before I started. like, how is this like the magic pudding for those of us who are old enough to remember? You just take away, and there's still more left.
The golden goose that laid the egg, yeah.
Yeah, so I didn't understand. Like, I just saw Bitcoin was basically email money.
Yep.
I didn't understand there was a finite amount of Bitcoin. And of course, when people are worried about inflation and that sort of stuff, things that are in scarce supply go up in value. So I went, oh, Bitcoin's actually kind of like gold. And one of my friends said, yeah, and there's this new thing coming out called Ethereum. And Ethereum, people can start projects on it and they can do all sorts of things. And I went, oh, okay, explain to me more about this. And he started telling me how Ethereum worked. And I'm like, okay, so Ethereum's kind of like oil or a phone connection that allows other things to run on it. And he's like, yeah, and there's these other projects that were coming up like Power Ledger and a few others, IOTA. And I said, this cryptocurrency, it's kind of like a little tiny stock market. There's all these different projects that do different things. And he went, yeah. And I went, oh, I understand the stock market. And I got a process for, how to choose the best stocks and how to avoid the worst ones. So I started looking at cryptocurrency as if it was a little tiny stock market.
Oh.
And the thing with crypto, as most people know, it's unregulated. Like if shares, if BHP shares go up 50% in one day, they close down the market and investigate what's going on.
Yep.
And if the NASDAQ share drops by 30% in one day, stop selling and they investigate what's going on. But cryptocurrency, you can't do that because it's not regulated. So I would research some of these things and say, oh, this is a really good project. And the next day it would go up by like 300, 400%. And I go, holy cow. And over the month, I'd make like 14,000%. I go, holy cow, this is like the stock market on steroids.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rubbish in there, but if you've got a criteria for checking and you know what you're doing, then you can actually make some incredible gains. So I was doing this and having a great old time. Because, previously, the best year I'd had in the stock market, I made 600% in a year. That was an absolute best year. And that happened once, right? And in cryptocurrency, I could make 1,000% in a week, easy.
That's crazy.
And I was chatting to my partner and saying, hey, look what I'm doing, And she's like, oh, that's fantastic. Can you show me how to do that? And I gave her the checklist and she just went bang, 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 bang. She started buying a few things, making 300 or 400% in a week. And because she's got a lower risk profile than me because she's not necessarily got all the market experience. And I talked to one of my friends who's a financial planner, and he said, oh, what are you up to these days? I said, I'm playing with crypto and making all these great gains. He's like, oh, can you show me how to do that? So I taught him how to do it. And then people told people. And I was like, I don't want to spend all my time teaching 100 people how to do this. So I just put it on a website.
Yep.
Here's the checklist. Here's how you do it. Free information. If anybody called me, I'd say, go to the website, look at there's the information on how to do it yourself. And then I had contact from my partner who said, like, this is all fun and games, but I want to work on my business. I don't have time to do the research anymore. Can you do it for me? And she's my partner and I love her and she knows where I live. So I went, okay. I'll run your lower risk portfolio and I'll run my higher risk portfolio at the same time and make some money. And then my friend who is the financial planner, he called me back and said, look, this is all fun and games, but I don't have time to do it. Will you do it for me? And I was like, whoa, hang on. You're my friend. I've known you for 25 years, but you don't know where I live. And, I don't want to risk a friendship because crypto can be very volatile. Yes, you can make 1,000% one day, but you can lose 50% the next day.
Highs and lows.
And I said to him, look, I really don't want to do it because if it drops by 50% in one day, if I've made a bad decision, I'm going to risk this 25-year friendship. He said, no, it won't happen. I said, no, I don't want to do it. A week later, he calls me again and says, will you take my money? Will you do it for me? I went, no. A week later, he rings me again and says, will you do it? And I said, no. And he said, please. And I went, oh, look, the only way I would do it is if we'd set up this kind of a legal structure, had it all policed and, verified and that sort of stuff. Got to do a unit trust because obviously financial planning, that's where I grew up. They do unit trusts with mutual funds and that sort of stuff. I said, this is the only way I would do it for you. And he said, you do whatever you got to do. I'll be happy with whatever you decide. So then I went and talked to the corporate lawyer, called the accountant, called an international tax lawyer and said, hey, I want to set up this unitized trust thing
There we go.
Yes, dogs. And make this thing all legal, all kosher, because there's no regulations, right? But we want to make it as if the regulations for mutual funds, for stock mutual funds, but for crypto.
Yep.
And the accountant said, "You're doing a mutual fund for crypto?" And I went, "Yeah." And the accountant goes, "Oh, I'll give you 10 grand for that." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I don't know how many accountants you know, Rich, but the last time any accountant has ever said, "I'll invest into that,"
No.
it's a rare letter day.
Hello.
So I thought, okay, we've got our first customer, our first real customer.
Yep.
So then I went back and, between myself and my partner and the financial planner and the corporate lawyer and the accountant, we all chipped in like, 10 grand each and started up this little thing. And okay, it's all legal, it's all kosher, it's all, compliant to all this regulation that doesn't even exist yet, but as if we're setting up a stock mutual fund. And then someone said, "Oh, we've got to have a logo and we've got to have a name for this thing." And I'm like, "Oh, you got any ideas?" You're looking around the table. You've got accountants, corporate lawyers, and financial planners. None of us are creative. None of us are in marketing. We're all geeks. Like we're all nerdy number geeks, right?
Numbers and technology.
Yeah, and we couldn't think of any ideas. We're sitting there trying to, we'd ironed out all the kinks in it.
Yep.
But then couldn't think of a name or a logo. And just then the dog walked into the room, a little Boston Terrier, and went, "Oh my God, there's the logo and there's the name." That was the best thing we could think of.
And it stuck.
We picked it up and it stuck. We said, we'll run this thing for 12 months. If it does well, we'll launch it to the public. If it doesn't do well, we'll just put it back into the box and we won't tell anyone about it.
Yep.
And obviously we did well over the first 12 months. We launched it to the public, and every year for the last 6.5 years, we've outperformed Bitcoin.
That's incredible.
Absolutely pleased with that. Yeah.
So tell me something. You've talked about accountants, but you've also talked about busy people. Who is this best for? Do you work with people other than the financial sector? Who's your target client, do you think?
Well, really, if you look at it in the US, the stats are that 90% of investors use a mutual fund or an index fund because they're simply too busy looking after their kids, looking after their business, doing their playing their sports, whatever. 90% of people don't have time to research their own stocks. In Australia, the figures are a little bit more rebellious because Australians are a bit more rebellious. But in Australia, it's 85% of investors who use a mutual fund or an index fund because they don't have time to research their own stocks. So it's basically anybody who wants to invest in the stock market but doesn't want to be bothered doing all the research, they give their money to a fund manager. And that's what we're looking at here. People who want to get the great returns in cryptocurrency but don't want to do the research. We've done, even after the big June crash where Bitcoin crashed down by 50-60%, even after that crash, the last 3 years, the fund has made 291%.
Wow, that's incredible.
So almost 300% in 3 years. And our investors, they don't know how we did it. We send out a newsletter every month saying this is what we did and this is why we did it, but they don't have to actually take the time to read the newsletter.
They don't have to worry about it.
Work.
That's a very big thing. That's a very powerful thing for busy people who are on the call today. If you're listening into this is certainly something you might want to look into. Now, I'd love for you to tell the audience about your 4-step proprietary coin process. What's that about?
All right. So in my first book, I had a 9-step criteria for choosing your own stocks for people who actually wanted to do that, people who didn't want to go and pay a financial planner. And obviously in the crypto world, it is simplified because you don't have to jump through all the hoops to list yourself on the stock exchange. So literally 2 guys in a garage started Power Ledger. And they didn't have enough money to list on the stock exchange, so they made a cryptocurrency. And one of their first investors, funnily enough, was Richard Branson, who's fully into solar power with his Necker Island. So with the 9-step criteria, some of those things don't apply because the average cryptocurrency project doesn't report on its earnings and they don't have a board of directors and things like that. So we simplified it right down to 4 steps. Easy to remember. So coin, COIN. And the number one thing that you check out is the C-suite, CEO, CFO, CMO, the guys who are actually running the project. And on the website, they might just be anonymous. They might not even have photos. And you go, well, if they're anonymous, where are they going to be? How am I going to track them down if I want my money back? There's a lot of rug pulls and scams and things that people have disappeared with their money in crypto. And so you want to check out the directors and the leaders of this thing, the C-suite, and don't just have a look at them and say, oh, they're there on the page, because it might be a Google stock image, or it might be a real person's name. But if you go and highlight that guy's name and search him on LinkedIn, he doesn't actually work for the project. So check them out. It literally takes about 60 seconds to scroll through, see if the team's there, see if the team are actually real people, Google them, check them on LinkedIn, go, yep, that lines up. So first tick there if they've actually got a real team with real experience working on the project.
Yep.
Then O stands for the offering. What are they actually doing? Okay. Now, there was someone out there a while ago who's like, oh, we're going to put avocados on the blockchain and revolutionize the fruit industry. Like, well, how does that work? How does that help me? Whereas, as I mentioned before, the guys with Power Ledger, they were empty nesters. Like, their kids had moved out of the house and they're like, oh, there's only me and the missus at home. And we've got these massive solar panels on the roof. We're generating so much more power than what we need now. The kids are gone. But if I sell that power back to the grid, I only get 10 cents a kilowatt. But when I turn on the TV, I'm paying 30 cents a kilowatt. Wouldn't it be great if I could sell that power to my neighbour and make the neighbour pay 15 cents? That way I'm getting paid extra than what I get paid for giving to the grid.
Yes,
and the neighbour is paying less than what he would giving to the grid. And so the guys, we're all connected on big infrastructure with electricity. We're all connected to the internet. So they figured out a way you could actually sell your excess solar credits to the neighbours, like an eBay for power. And that's a great offering. It actually helps the person who's generating power. It helps the person who's consuming power. Yeah. Fantastic offering. There's some offerings out there that are legitimately like, who's going to pay for this? Like, why would I do that? So it's got to be something that solves a real world problem.
It's got to have utility, doesn't it?
Exactly. So that's C and O. I is for the investors. So who are other investors into this project? Because no one wants to be first and no one wants to be last. As I said, with Power Ledger, one of their first investors was Richard Branson, because he generates a lot of solar power on Necker Island. And rather than selling it to the grid, he wanted to sell it to other people when he found out about their offering. So I don't have as much money as Richard Branson. I don't have as many people working for me as Richard Branson. But if he jumps into a project and he's one of the early investors, I think he's smarter than me. He's richer than me. He's probably paid 40 analysts to check this project out.
You've got to look at it, don't you?
So I've already got a tick from the CEO suite. I've got a tick from the offering. And then I go, the investor, he's no dummy. So I'll give you a good tick from there.
Yep.
If the other investors are just people who also got roped into, Squid Game coin or I Love Boobs coin or F Joe Biden coin, those sorts of, I don't want to be involved with those people. Right?
Pass.
And then the final one, the N, is the network, because the great thing is you can drop $100 into a coin project and it might hit up to $10,000, but then who do you sell it to?
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be a network of people who are willing to buy this thing from you. Otherwise, you've just, you bought one of these NFTs and nobody wants to buy it from you. And you've got your money. Potentially, I've got $10,000, but I can't sell it to anybody.
But unlikely.
Okay? Yeah. So you check the network. You check all the normal social medias, the Twitters, the Facebooks, the YouTubes. Who's talking about this project? Who's interested in this project? Who's going to support me with my questions? Who's going to be the one to buy it from me when I want to sell? So it's very simple. COIN, C-suite, offering, investors, and network. Basic. And again, takes you 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes to check through a project and find out if it's legit. If it gets one red cross, then don't do it.
Don't do it.
Got 4 green ticks, then go for it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Otherwise, you pay someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, and you're happy to burn your money, that's for sure and certain, if you don't follow that coin process. Now, I'm wondering, I know that you've got a lot going on your website, but if somebody wants to, connect with you and work with you, what is the location that they're going to find you, and what's the onboarding process?
Well, the main site is bostontrading.co. So just bostontrading.co, not .com. That's where we have the managed fund. That's where we have the newsletters and things like that. So you can literally go back and see the last 6 years of newsletters. So you can see what were we buying before the pandemic occurred? What were we looking at? What were we doing when this happened? And you can see the results, what we're buying, what we're selling, and how we do things. So the newsletter usually starts off with a top-down sort of, here's what's happening in the global macroeconomic environment, here's how that affects stocks and shares, here's how that affects cryptocurrency. And it's an educational piece. Like, you read 5 newsletters, you'll be smarter than most economists easily. So this is obviously where we do it for you.
Yep.
If you don't want to do it yourself. But for people who want to learn how to do it themselves, for that 10 or 15% of people, they go to Krillionaire.com. So it's literally CRY for crypto, and then the last bit of billionaire. So Krillionaire.com. And that's where we've got a bunch of videos and blog posts and all the coins that we actually do research on. So you can actually look in there and say, here's why we think this is a good project. Here's how to download a wallet. Here's how to protect yourself. Here's how to do this. So all the people who want to learn how to do it yourself, if you've got time to do it, absolutely do it yourself. If you don't have time to do it, then we just run like a mutual fund at Boston. So we charge 2% a year. It's pretty cheap and easy if you don't have the time.
Yeah, and making that a simplified process for busy people is where I think that Boston Trading is going to stick out above all else. And, you know, the way that the cryptocurrency space is ever evolving, it's certainly going to be up there with the leaders in this particular space. And with all that being said, Jeremy, I've absolutely loved this call, loved spending some time with you on the My Future Business show today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.